Joining me on the call today, I'm super excited to have Prosper and Kath for the call. Welcome, guys.
Thank you so much, David, for having us on the call today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Today's going to be a super interesting topic. The topic for discussion today is prepare to lead. And I think when we talk about what's going on in the world right now with the economy, you know, there's some stress and there's some strain on people. And I feel like, you know, this is almost unprecedented for a lot of people in this generation because the last recession was in the 90s. And whether we call it a recession or not, we're going through some tough economic times. So let's talk about this idea of leadership and why it's so important right now. Who would like to sort of jump in first? Go, Kath.
Yeah, I can pick that one up. The biggest thing with leadership is adaptability. I know that's a word that you've used often, David, is those that are more adaptable and flexible can improve the business, they can improve the people, they can improve the culture, and the profitability of the business can go as well. But there is going to be, businesses are going to have to be looking to staff that are able to problem solve. We're not in the industrial age anymore that people are just turning up and clocking in, clocking out, getting paid for their hours. They're actually needing to produce, problem solve, and even make things better. And it's very different times coming. Yeah.
Prosper, your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. And I think touching on the whole adaptability theme that Kath is talking about, there's what's called wartime leaders and there's peacetime leaders. So these are two different leaders that if you've been running a business or you've been in, you know, in an environment where everything was cool, calm, and collected, there's a different kind of leadership that is needed than when, you know, you're at the battlefront and there you really need to just grab what's essential. Like you were telling me earlier on about essentialism, you know what I mean? You can't carry everything into a war zone. You only need the things that are going to be important. And I'm thinking what we're bringing to the table is, you know, that different type of leadership and what are those essential tools that are going to be needed in the trenches at the battlefield. So
yeah, awesome. You know, I'm a big believer in business. There's sort of three stages that a lot of businesses go through. The first one is really the technical stage, or what we call, you know, getting out of chaos and getting into control. And for most, that stops them from growing because they're so busy putting out fires all day that they really don't think strategy. The second level is the growth level. And some people are lucky enough that they move out of just running around in circles doing the work and they start actually building their business, which means building their marketing and sales system and building their delivery mechanism. And so for me, that's where the growth occurs. But the third element, and very few people get to spend enough time here, is what we call the leverage level. And this is really where leadership kicks in. And Michael Gerber, who wrote the E-Myth, said it really well. He said, you know, most people who start a business have an entrepreneurial seizure. Right? They have a moment in time where they reckon they can do it better than everyone else. And then they go to work for probably the worst boss on the planet themselves, and they become self-employed. And I really feel like when we talk about preparing to lead, it's not about being a leader right now. It's about knowing that what's coming in the economy right now is a very interesting time. And for those people who are hoping it's just going to settle down and go back to normal, I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. I think the people that recognize what's structural in terms of change, which is permanent versus seasonal, are going to start to see some winnings here. And so my view is that those people who are in a position where they've got their business in control, they might have been growing or they might have been stagnated through the last few years, but they've got time to spend in the leadership role so they can see what's coming and they can anticipate the people who are going to win. How do you guys see that?
Yeah, I agree. It's really, and my husband was in the military for 20 years and they had something he worked for combat survival training school. Anyone that flew went out and had to literally survive a for real. And there's a rule of three, and this reminds me that 3 minutes without breath, someone will die without oxygen. And like a business, if you don't have cash flow and you're not able to pay, your business is going to die. You can go 3 hours in a harsh environment, so it gives them a bit longer, 3 days without drinkable water, 3 weeks without food. But the one they don't have in there is the 3 seconds mindset, the decision when someone crashes or is stranded. within 3 seconds, they decide if they want to live or die. And it feels like this is the moment for businesses. They have a choice and they need to decide if they're going to survive or, see what happens.
Yeah. Prosper, your take on this?
Absolutely. I absolutely love that military take, that whole 3 second, side of things. In my world, we call it a 3 second attention span. If you are not really looking at what's happening, things might derail. But looking at the leadership aspect of what you just spoke about there, there's a statement that I really, really love, which is called calm is contagious. So like you're saying, when these soldiers are out there, if you start panicking, in the midst of a battle or anything else, you derail your company, so to speak. Your staff members are going to need to have a leader that's going to lead them through all of this. Let's not forget that they're also going through stuff in their personal life, the interest rates, they're probably renting, and the landlords have put up the prices and things of that nature. So for them to now come and be productive at work, you're going to need to bring out the best in them. So whether it's tools, whether it's you just being a forthright leader and being calm around everything else that's going to be happening is going to be very, very essential. And if you know how to actually, and I think Kath, you touch up on this, if you actually know, the capacity that your team has by looking at what their actual capabilities are, you can literally get the most out of your staff members despite what's happening in and around their environment.
So here's a couple of interesting points. We talk about, prepared to lead. It's a very nebulous topic, but if we look at what is actually happening right now, top of mind for a lot of people is the impact that AI is going to have on business. Now, some people are skeptical and they're going, oh, you can't use it to write copy because, the internet will know. And a lot of people are saying, well, I don't understand it, or it's going to replace our job. So there's two sides to this, right? But I think what you said, Prosper, was super interesting. And it wasn't about whether AI replaces people. It's whether people use AI to do their job better.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned those 3 sections of business: the technical growth, the growth, and the leverage. I believe with AI, it's all about just leveraging what has been working already and just making it super, super easy. All right. We could say, in a very easy example, people used to use the horse and carriage to deliver goods to the marketplace, and then the lorry or the engine came about. That didn't mean they didn't go farming. Okay, so that didn't replace farming. It only replaced the means to the market. So what is the means to the market that AI can bring to the table? We still need to produce the crops. We still need to be there for our customers. We still need to run a business that's profitable and enjoyable. AI just so happens to be that bridge. So if a lot of people are going to look at it as the be it and handle, then they're not going to have a good harvest.
And really, I think you touched on this idea of augmentation. So a lot of people think AI is going to replace people, and I think it's just going to augment their ability to do their job, which is an extension and just gives them more capacity. And it sort of ties in with another thing. When we talk about prepared to lead, I think the most significant thing that I'm seeing right now is that employees are expecting to make more money. And as a result of that, the business owners are saying, well, linearly, I can't pay you more money unless I charge more. But there's another way that an employee can make more money, and that's to move away from being paid for their time to getting paid for their results. What do you think about this, Kath?
Absolutely agree. And there's no better time to really, as a leader, get to know ourselves, but also our staff, because something like DISC, Myers-Briggs, there's many tools out there. If you know someone's natural ability, you could have someone, for example, that's a high influencer in DISC, the high I, that's sitting there doing data entry, but they would be an absolute gun as a salesperson building rapport. So maybe they can do a little bit of data, but they help out on the sales team. So having the right people doing the right jobs at the right time, that is just a recipe for success, if you ask me.
Almost a motto, isn't it?
Yeah.
Prosper, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting, really shifting from the hourly rate to a performance-based model. You will notice that, let's say you're running your business and maybe video happens to be a component of what you want to produce as a content outlet. But if you hire a video producer and you're only creating one video maybe a day or a week or a month, what are they doing throughout all this time? So, you could then utilize them either as a content writer or somebody who's engaging on your socials and really expanding on those videos instead of them twiddling their thumbs to just wait until you've produced a video or whatever it is, your means of production, you know what I mean? So yeah, or you could just hire somebody who just comes in for that specific role, and then they actually just, make use of their expertise and they go on and, go where they're actually needed, where in the words of today, where they're actually essential. So yeah.
Super interesting, because I think, when we think about wages and getting paid per hour, this is really an industrial age legacy, right? Because in those days, we needed people on production line. They needed to show up at 7 in the morning. They needed to finish at 3, because if they weren't standing at the machine couldn't produce. We're so far beyond the industrial age now. We've moved into the information age and the communication age. And so now what we're starting to realize is that we don't need people to stand on production line. We need people to produce. And if we look at production, we can actually become more effective in exactly what you just described there. Because I think the biggest conflict is if I'm an employee who gets paid per hour, the only way I can make more money, sounds ironic, is either become better at my job and get paid more as a promotion, or become worse at my job and take longer and get paid overtime. Now, I know which one's easier, right? And we have a tendency to then have to micromanage people because they're taking too long to do things because they're not encouraged to finish things quickly. So it puts the onus on the business owner of efficiency, not on the employee. The whole idea of moving to performance-based then put people on the same side.
Absolutely. I believe there's also, going to the military reference, taking ownership, if if you're playing in a team, if you take ownership of your output, all right, you then are the person that's accountable for that. All right. If you're playing in a team, if you're the striker, your goal, your role within that team is to shoot goals. And if that doesn't happen, you're not going to look at the goalkeeper and say, hey, why didn't you score goals? All right. So I think that's where leadership now comes in. When we can actually start activating our teams so they perform to their more optimus, if that's a word, to the optimum, and really leverage their skill set. And if they're not the person for that job, maybe we can actually start fostering a culture of continuous learning, leading them towards the right kind of production. Not only is that going to create productivity within the business, but can you imagine the mindset of that person when they go back to their home and they're happy because they feel that whatever their contribution is being, realized and being appreciated? Because at the end of the day, we had 2 years of people just sitting at home being told they're not needed, and now they're showing up at the jobs that nobody needed them for. Can you imagine what that is doing to their head and productivity and things of that nature? So if we can be leaders and then sport where we're missing capacity and then upskill our team members, I think a lot of us will actually skate through this whole impending time without even having noticed, because we're literally leveraging the people we already have without having to look elsewhere.
Yeah. And we talk about this a lot. And one of the biggest myths about business, right? To me, business is super simple, right? Find a problem that people are prepared to pay to solve and then solve it for them. And if you keep that in mind as your primary objective as a business, then you can adapt to the economy, you can adapt to the environment, you can adapt to the country, you can adapt to the technology. And I think often people are thinking, I want to keep things the way they are. And I think evolution of us as humans is going to happen regardless of whether you want to keep things the way they are. There's elements that will stay. Humans are always going to be human and they're always going to want to communicate with each other. But now we have 1,000 channels that we can communicate. And people are now saying too much noise. I don't want to get on social media. I don't want to hear anymore. Well, they still need to connect, don't they? And so I think preparing to lead to me is literally saying I need to carve some time out of my busy schedule to actually try and read the play. and try and understand what this economy is going to do, not only to my business, to my industry, to my country, to the world, right? Because when we start to read the play, then we can be in the right place to catch that ball, as you mentioned. Really, when we think about team sports, and when you said that, it reminded me, my kids used to play Auskick, right? And I know, and the first game was hilarious because we went out there and they all jumped into the football field, and it's like a little herd of sheep running around with the ball in the middle. And the problem is there's no one to kick the ball to because they're all in the herd. And then sooner or later, one of the kids works it out and they go, I should stand back a little bit and call out, kick it to me. And then they start to realize there's positions, and positions require us to actually be disciplined about what our role is and make sure that our teammates understand how to work with us rather than everyone just chasing after the same thing. And I think prepare to lead is literally about understanding what is the play coming up in business and how do I prepare my team and myself to make sure that I optimize my business so I can not only survive this, but actually use it as a leverage point to grow. What are your thoughts on this, Kath?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to being, better, cheaper, faster. And in a game, you've only got to watch sport. And some teams just have such rapport and connection. Everyone knows their job. They get the ball, boom, boom, boom. It's at the other end, and they've scored. And the other team's scratching their heads wondering what's happening. So, and it's one of those things that when people know what their role is and that it's clearly defined, and that's something that, to be honest, is lacking nowadays. It's a bit like, hey, you turn up, do your work, and let me know if there's a problem. If it can be more defined, it can work much, much better. And people are in their comfort zone. You don't stick a defender in an attacking forward line. If they're a goalkeeper, which I was, by the way, in hockey goals, and that, I could do wing, but I could not do attack. I was not comfortable there. So why would we put people in positions that they're not comfortable? Put them where they're going to shine. And the team, my favorite acronym is together, everyone achieves more. And that's what we're aiming for. That's what a leader does.
And this is your space, Kath, because I know that you work with getting teams to be dynamic and actually communicate effectively. And I think the problem isn't just putting the right people in the right role. It's about how they actually communicate with each other. Because what you touched on with a team that's successful is they don't look like they're communicating better. They just seem to be intuitively connected with each other. And it looks easy, right? And when a team makes it look easy, there's a lot of background training and a lot of leadership that has actually got them to that point. And I think that's the missing element. A lot of people are still looking for this magic answer and it'll be over. And I think this is not over. This is actually prime time. For people who now say, hey, a messy economy actually produces lots of opportunities, and those people that are ready for them, they don't have to look hard, right? Because we're not in a competitive environment anymore. We've got people falling away because they can't sustain their business anymore. Those businesses are going to close down, go up for sale, get rid of their employees, get rid of their customers. And there's a theory called last man standing, which means if everyone around you is falling apart and you've got cash in the bank, you're in a good position.
Yeah, and it's a good time for acquisition, those that want the growth and the leverage, and team building comes into that acquisition as well. You're really having to know who the new players are when you acquire a business. So, So, look, I'm mindful of time, and, if we wanted to summarize this and really get an opinion from you guys, when we talk about prepare to lead, what do you think the top 2 or 3 things that, from your perspective, a business owner should be doing right now? What do you think they might be? Very good question. I would say absolute communication. Know yourself, but know how to flex and communicate, because when things aren't done, when people are opposing you, it's because it hasn't been delivered in a way that it gets through to their gatekeeper quite easily. So learn how to deliver things to different types of people, which involves knowing yourself, but also pause, stop, get off that treadmill or hamster wheel or merry-go-round, whatever you want to call it, stop and reflect and make some planning time.
And for me, like planning time, I think people don't spend enough time planning, because it's not about the plan, it's about the planning. It's
the planning process, and it's the communication with the team. It's not sitting there and a leader typing out a document and going, here's the plan. It's the communication in creating the plan and involving your team at the early stages so they're on the same page.
Awesome. Thank you. Prosper.
Fantastic. It's all about team cohesion, fostering whatever innovation that you can to really create the value that you want to be known for in the marketplace. I mean, this is we've had a safety net that was, keeping us out of harm's reach. But some people chose to use that as a hammock. So if you want to jump on as a future leader, you really want to stand up and show your people that we're here and lead them to the next realm of what we're going into. Yeah.
Top 2 tips for you, Prosper. If you're going to give someone action items out of today's call, what would you tell them?
Fantastic. So as a digital marketer, I would just say, hey, like what we've been talking about, look at your systems. All right. What are your systems doing in terms of communicating with your team? Have you got a good CRM system that talks to your team and that also talks to your customers? And then second of all, what's the cadence of you showing up in the world using whatever we now have and the infrastructure that you already have within your business? So your tools and the cadence, and just keep showing up, because if you don't, somebody else is going to eat your lunch. And
I love this idea, right? Because when you talk about cadence, I think part of the business owner's obligation is to create an innovation space within their business. And I know you've been talking a lot about the AI and the implication that it has on the workplace. And for me, it's like, well, I don't know exactly what it's going to turn out like, and no one really does. But if we don't use it or test it or play with it or understand how it can impact, it's like keeping your head in the sand. And the problem with keeping your head in the sand is which part of your anatomy is sticking up. It's a part that's going to get kicked by the economy, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like, this idea of making the space for leadership, number one, making sure that there's a cadence. So it's not just a one-off space. It has to be on a regular basis. Looking at new technology, and rather than saying, oh, that's never going to affect us, the question is, how can we use it?
Yep.
Okay, how can we use it? And even if you play with it only for a couple of months and you work out that it's not going to affect you, at least you know. And so leadership is sometimes about being prepared to go out on a limb and try something out. And for me, like the simple thing is this, right? I believe that when we look at the economy slowing down, people should speed up. And what I mean by that is that they need to move and do things that they should have done last year, which is create the space for planning, create the space for innovation, start challenging their team on not how I'm going to pay you more, but how do you become more valuable to the organization? Because often people will say, I need a pay rise because the cost of living's gone up. I get excited when I hear that, because I think, great, so now we're going to work out where that money's coming from, because it needs to come out of something. Now, I can squeeze my margins so much, but if I squeeze them too much, my business closes. So how do we create value in a space where at the moment we don't see it? And this is the innovation side.
Yeah, can I add one more thing, David? It also, and we have discussed this earlier before we were recording, is if someone can do a job in 4 hours instead of 8 hours, why are we docking their pay? Because they can do the result. They can, with this augmentation, if they do it in 4 hours and then they've got time to do some other things to generate some more income, or they can finish a little bit early and get some family time, because after COVID, people are realising spending time with work-life balance, harmony, is a word you use, David, is as important as more money.
Yeah. And this whole thing with AI saying it's going to replace jobs, that's like saying that the car replaced the job of the horse. Well, imagine if we had that many horses on the road, geez, it'd be pretty stinky out there. But I suppose my point about this is we often fear this innovation, this move forward, and we think it's going to actually make the world a worse place. But the truth of the matter is that the standard of living across the globe now is higher than it's ever been before, ever. And this is a result of innovation. This is a result of people doing things smarter and working smarter, not harder. So I feel like when a small business owner says, you know what, I can actually do something to move forward by thinking of better ways to do things. And I think I've heard about AI being used to do things like tender responses, because it fills in all the standard questions. Because it's not really artificial intelligence. It's just information collation that is accelerated. You still have to ask the question and you still have to vet the answer. So, when people think it's going to replace us, I think that's a bit naive. I think it's going to help us. And that's the attitude I think people need to have towards the things that are coming. When people say they want a pay rise, you go, great, that's exciting. How do we improve the value that we produce?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Guys, look, thanks so much for joining us. Super interesting discussion. I think it's going to become pretty heated as we move on, because no one likes this idea of being squeezed. And sometimes, you look at it and you say, well, we can try and resist what's going on, or we can embrace what's going on. And for me, the embracing of it is the exciting part, so we can actually see what the changes will be. So really appreciate your time today. And look, hope some people got some insight out of the conversation. So thanks again.
Fantastic. Can't wait.